Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Week 25 results. So it's been a long week with a lot of fixtures, and some fixtures have been super interesting, and there's been some real big surprises this week, and especially in the APAC region. The APAC region has been rather weird. Yeah, that's all we can say about that, but we will crack straight into our results here. As we start off with the NA region, we now have the results on the Friday as well, because we have 3 days of fixtures nowadays. And we started on Friday, July the 24th, with Atlanta Reign taking on the Boston Uprising. And so this is a 3-1 win for the Atlanta Reign. And you would expect the Atlanta Reign to win this match. But you would expect the Atlanta Reign to win this match 3-0. This wasn't an massively convincing performance from the Atlanta Reign, if I was to say that. To drop a map to Boston Uprising right now, it's not a brilliant look, especially for where Atlanta Reign want to be. Obviously they've had some changes in recent times, with Kodak going to the coaching role, with Baby Bay retiring, and it's not convincing. It's not convincing. That's what I would say. But at least they get the win. A 3-1 win is still very good, and it keeps them right in that mix, in that mid-table clash, or just above mid-table clash. And yeah, I would hope that they continue consistency against the lower end teams. Boston Uprising, I just don't know. Color Hex is so bad on the Genji. Like, oh my god. Anyway, moving on. Florida Mayhem taking on the San Francisco Shock. The rematch of the May Melee final, which was 4-2 to the Shock in the end. And this was very much a teller of where the Florida Mayhem are at right now. The Florida Mayhem, they weren't completely stomped. Which is great for the Mayhem. But it was quite clear that the San Francisco Shock had a lot of quality. And we got to see Tayo, the new Genji player for the San Francisco Shock. He initially played McCree, I think. Yeah, I don't know why they play McCree Tracer on Oasis, but he switched over to the Genji, and he looked okay. I can't say Tayo has looked phenomenal this weekend. I can't say that. But he definitely got the job done. I think that's the best wording for it. He got the job done for the Shock. And if that's the case, then that's going to be great for the Shock. They've got a definite Genji player now who can definitely do very well on that hero. And he's also got hit scan in his back pocket as well. So, Florida Mayhem, nah. The Florida Mayhem are never going to peak this season. I think Florida Mayhem could have an amazing season next season. If they make the right moves in the off season, Florida Mayhem could become extremely strong. But this is not a bad look for the Mayhem. I wouldn't be disappointed if I was a Mayhem fan here. San Francisco Shock are right up there right now. And to go down 3-1 is not too bad. If this had been a convincing 3-0 for the Shock, then I would have been like, Mayhem, this is rough. But 3-1, that's okay. Then we move to APAC on the Saturday, and we see the Seoul Dynasty take on the Chengdu Hunters. Chengdu Hunters got an amazing reverse sweep against the New York Excelsior last week. And, oh boy. So, what do we do with Seoul Dynasty? Seoul Dynasty, it's been a week of so near yet so far. This ends up as a 3-2 victory for the Chengdu Hunters. Chengdu Hunters, the meta in the past 2 weeks has been absolutely perfect. Especially in APAC. We've seen Ball, we've seen Zarya, we've seen Genji. Jinmu on the Genji, Amon obviously on the Ball, but they've been able to bring in Late Young on the Zarya. And it has made a massive difference to this Chengdu Hunters squad. And we'll see that also in the later match as well. But this is so in the ballpark of the Chengdu Hunters. And it's no surprise they're doing well. But there is a caveat to this, and I'm sorry Chengdu Hunters fans, but I think this is a honeymoon period. I don't think this is going to last for the Chengdu Hunters, especially not after this week, as we lose this hero pool and we go back to having Orisa in rotation. And I am heavily expecting Orisa Sigma to come back as the tank meta. And if that happens, I don't think Chengdu will maintain this sort of form. I'm willing to be proved wrong. If Chengdu somehow manage some sort of miraculous turnaround in this late part of the season, then wow, what a playoffs we could be in for. But yeah, it's tough, but we'll talk about more about Chengdu a little bit later on. Then we had the Shanghai Dragons taking on the London Spitfire. Now, I had this down as a pretty convincing 3-0 for the Dragons. It wasn't. London came into this very well prepared. They played the Chengdu comp. They didn't play JMac once. We saw Jihan the whole match, which was really refreshing. They went 2-0 down, but brought it back to 2-2. But it ended up as a 3-2 win for the Dragons. I think this was definitely winnable for the Spitfire. Bernard went off the map twice on the pool, the last map, which was not great. But with Jihan on the ball and Bernard on the Zarya, it seemed to work a lot more. We're seeing more out of Hailey at the moment, and it seems to be okay for the Spitfire. And if the Spitfire can continue this sort of form that they've shown against the Shanghai Dragons, remember the meta is changing, then the Spitfire could get wins before the end of the season. But it's going to be tough. Spitfire have got a really rough run in. And I mean, if it's the fixture I'm thinking of next week, Spitfire need to get something out of that. They really do, because they're actually now the lowest team in APAC. They've fallen below the Chengdu Hunters because of Chengdu Hunters' result later on. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Then we had New York Excelsior taking on the Guangzhou Charge. This was impressive from New York. This was a 3-0 for the Excelsior. Exactly the sort of bounce back you want to see from this team after losing 3-2 to the Chengdu Hunters. And we got to see something a little bit different. We got to see Bianca instead of Hotbar. We also got to see the Mano Wrecking Ball, which we don't see very often, but overall it looked really good. And Haxel was doing good as ever on that Genji, but Bianca seemed to stabilise this team a lot. There's been some question marks over Hotbar this season. He's been on and then he's been off. He's been hot, then he's been cold. Mano has been kind of all over the place. But with Bianca coming in, this whole team seemed to slot into place really nicely. And overall, they had the better of the Guangzhou Charge. Guangzhou Charge are our Summer Showdown champions. So this is an extremely good look for New York Excelsior ahead of the Community Cup. The Community Cup? Countdown Cup. I keep getting that mixed up. I don't know why. But this is really, really impressive from the Excelsior. And they are a dark horse for that Countdown Cup. I really do think they are. Because I don't think Chengdu are going to be able to maintain what they're doing. And Shanghai are going to be Shanghai. But if New York can play like that, they'll go toe-to-toe with the Shanghai squad. Without a doubt. But we move back to NA now on the Saturday, and we had San Francisco Shock taking on the Vancouver Titans. What do we say? This is the fastest match in Overwatch League history. This is a 3-0 for the San Francisco Shock. It was that one-sided that the Shock subbed in Super on the last map instead of Tayo, and Super played the Genji. It wasn't close. The Shock were by far the better team. Vancouver Titans did not know how to deal with this San Francisco Shock squad, and yeah, that's all there is to say about that match. Very, 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 very one-sided. I think probably the most one-sided match we've seen all season. Anyway, moving on. Florida Mayhem taking on the Washington Justice. Again, fairly one-sided. 3-0 for the Florida Mayhem. A very, very good return to the form for the Florida Mayhem after a nasty loss against the Shock. They came back and they absolutely pummeled the Washington Justice, as you would expect them to do to a team of Washington Justice's sort of level. And if Florida Mayhem can continue that sort of form against those sort of teams, the Florida Mayhem will be just fine heading into the end of the season. And they should get a fairly good seeding, providing they can get something next week. They should get a fairly good seeding for that Countdown Cup as well. But then we had the Boston Uprising taking on the Dallas Fuel. So, again, litmus test of the Dallas Fuel. I want you to 3-0 teams like the Boston Uprising if you want to be a challenger, if you want to be a contender, to get up to those top 10 places, to start mingling with the likes of the Florida Mayhem. But guess what? They drop a map to the Boston Uprising. It doesn't look all that convincing. And it's just, they hype you up and they let you down. It always happens. It's a really rough one. And, it's a good win for the Fuel in the end. I'm not going to lie. But I would have liked it to have been more convincing. I would have liked it to have been better. That's what I will say about that one. But then we're moving into the Sunday now. And we had the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators. Now, I'll hold my hands up. I had this down as a 3-0 for the Fusion. No bones about it. This was by far not that. This was an extremely close match. Extremely close. Well done to Los Angeles Gladiators for taking this so close. And they did something similar to what Chengdu do. They subbed in Mirror, but they subbed in Mirror on the Zarya. So this is something we will see if Zarya is heavily meta, which he has been. This sort of dive, but Zarya is bubbling the dive hero, the dive tank, whether it be a Winston or a Hammond. So when Zarya is so heavily meta, which she has been in the past 2 weeks, we're seeing the people who used to be Zaryas in GOATs be subbed in on that off-tank role. And that's why we've seen Late Young back, that's why we've seen Mirror on the Zarya. And I think it's been pretty darn effective. It certainly looked effective for the Gladiators. And Kevster looked good, Birdwing looked real good, and this was a Gladiators that can compete with some of the best in the league. This is what the Gladiators we thought we were going to turn up at the start of the season, but have never actually shown their faces. This is a 3-2 for the Fusion, but this is an extremely good look for the Gladiators. Extremely good look, and I want them to continue on in this fashion. They can really compete up there. They really can. They just need to keep going. They need to keep grinding. They need to keep getting performances like this. But it's an extremely tough week for the Gladiators. We'll talk about them again in a minute. But moving back to APAC now on the Sunday, and we saw Chengdu Hunters taking on the Hangzhou Spark. Oh dear. This is a 3-0 for the Chengdu Hunters. Hangzhou, that's rough. That's just rough. They did not know how to deal with Chengdu. Jinmu ran ragged. Ameng ran ragged. So did Late Young. I can't believe I'm saying Chengdu won 3-0 against the Hangzhou Spark. But the meta, again, and I reiterate this, heavily favours Chengdu Hunters. Heavily favours Chengdu Hunters. With no Orisa in play, it really, really falls into their ballpark, especially with, the ability to play the Zarya Hammond. So much in their favour. So we've got no hero pools next week. We've got no hero pools during the Community Cup. Countdown Cup. It's Countdown Cup. Countdown Cup. Countdown Cup. But we've got no hero pools. So it's most likely it will go back to Orisa Sigma. And when that happens, I think Chengdu will get caught out. I think the meta will not favour them. And they may try and continue with this Zarya Bull comp. If it works, I'll hold my hand up and I'll say, or hands up and I'll say, I was wrong. But I don't think that will get value against Orisa Sigma. And if they are forced onto the Orisa Sigma comps, they will look like the inferior team. So that is what I would say about Chengdu Hunters. The thing is, with this win, they are guaranteed 1 or 2 seed in first or second seed in the community, the Countdown Cup. So they will either be behind Shanghai or in front of Shanghai, depending on Shanghai's results. So, yeah, it's very interesting. Chengdu will definitely get their best seeding ever in one of these tournaments. And can they make it count? I mean, if they get top seed, they'll get a win on their record, which could be invaluable. But after this, we saw the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Seoul Dynasty. This was a 3-0 for the Shanghai Dragons. It's closer than it may seem. This was the Seoul Dynasty gave a good account of themselves. The Shanghai Dragons are just too good. And the fascinating thing about the Shanghai Dragons, and we've seen some other teams do it in NA as well, is that they know that they're actually pretty weak on the Genji. They know that Fleta is not too good of a Genji. So, what do? Well, they don't play the Genji. They decided to play Tracer Sombra Dive. And it's very, very effective. Lilip Sombra beat London. It really did. And it got extreme value here against the Seoul Dynasty. And I like the fact that the Shanghai Dragons are not being dragged into the meta. They are playing to their strengths. And that is what has got them 2 wins this week. It really, really has. The only question I have had over the Shanghai Dragons this week is when they attempted to play Wrecking Ball against London. And Fearless did not look great on the Wrecking Ball. Which is, we haven't criticised Fearless a lot recently, but he looks a damn sight better on the Winston than he does on the Wrecking Ball, and he needs to stick to it. But after this, we went back to NA. We've got 3 more matches to go through. Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the Paris Eternal. Gladiators coming off the back of that really nice display against the Fusion. But the Paris Eternal, this is their only match this week. They were allowed to prepare for it very much. And, with the Gladiators having to play Fusion as well, this is rough. This is a 3-0 for the Paris Eternal. This almost guarantees them the top spot for the Countdown Cup. Paris Eternal are looking so strong with Genji in meta. And this is the difference with Paris Eternal. If Genji stays meta, their tank line is very versatile. They can play the Reinhardt, they can bring in no smite on the Winston, which they did, or they can put in Ben Best, he can play the Reinhardt, he can play the Rissa. So Hanbin can play bloody anything. He can play Zarya, who he's fantastic on. He can play D.Va, he can play Sigma. He's been looking fantastic all season. So the Paris Eternal's tank line is very versatile, so is their support line. But it will heavily depend on the Paris Eternal going into the Countdown Cup and further down the line into playoffs, how the meta falls in terms of DPS. If we stay heavily Genji, the Paris Eternal are extreme dark horses for the entire league, in my opinion. If we move away from it, we go to more hit scan, and we move away from the flanking sort of heroes, I'm mainly talking about Doomfist and Genji, then Sparkle starts to get less effective. And this is where the Paris Eternal could be undone. But in this current meta, no matter what the tanks are, in this current DPS meta, Paris Eternal are one of the best, if not the best, in this league. And it showed here. It showed here. The Los Angeles Gladiators could not hang with them. This 3-0 is very well earned by the Paris Eternal, and I don't see a team that's going to stop them right now. And then we move on to the Toronto Defiance taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. Again, Philadelphia Fusion were taken very close by the Gladiators, but the Toronto Defiant cannot do the same. This is a 3-0 for the Philadelphia Fusion. Impressive for the Fusion to bounce back from a tough match against the Gladiators where they didn't look absolutely on point. But again, it was more of a high-level Overwatch instead of Fusion coming down to the Papega level against the Gladiators. So I think this is a good win for the Fusion. Toronto Defiant, Fusion are an extremely good team. And I don't think many people expected Toronto Defiant to get anything from this match. And it's just a case of we move on and we need to get results in the matches that we can win. But our last match was the Washington Justice taking on the Houston Outlaws. Oh dear, Houston. This is a 3-1 for the Washington Justice. I think this tank line issue, especially hydration, is coming back to bite the Outlaws big time. They need a main tank. They need a stable main tank. I'm sorry. They really do. This is really rough. Washington, though, looked better. We've seen better play for Main God. Stitch and Tuba really started to play well, and they didn't get outclassed by a really good DPS line on the Houston Outlaws. So Washington Justice are well worthy of this win, and I mean it puts them on the same amount of wins as Vancouver. So Washington could start to creep up the league if they can just get a couple of more wins towards the end of the season, but they have not got many matches left. So yeah, it's a rough one. But we're going to take a look at the standings just to round this video out. At the top we still have Shanghai Dragons on that 22-2 record. I don't think they are going to be usurped now. I think Shanghai Dragons will be the #1 team in the standings in this league this season. Whatever you take from the standings this season, it's kind of rough to kind of look at it because of the way in which the league has been set up. But Shanghai are on top, Philadelphia in second. Again, I think that's a bit of a false prophecy. Remember that the team below them, instead, the San Francisco Shock, have played 2 less matches than the Philadelphia Fusion. I think our top 2 teams will be the Dragons and the Shock somehow. In fourth, we have the Guangzhou Charge. Again, they've played a lot of matches this season. There's a lot of teams below them that could usurp them once they play their matches in hand. Paris Eternal in fifth. Again, I think they all finish above the Guangzhou Charge. I think they've got too many matches to... Well, they've got 2 more matches to play than the Guangzhou Charge. I think they've got the potential to be above them. New York in 6th. Florida Mayhem in 7th. Atlanta Reign in 8th. Los Angeles Valiant in 9th. We haven't seen the Valiant this week. Hangzhou Spark in 10th in that middle of the road place. Seoul Dynasty down on 11th now. They have a lot of matches to play. Plenty of time to turn it around. 3 matches against London Spitfire after the Countdown Cup. So there's a lot of time to make up ground for the Seoul Dynasty, but it's still not looking as good as we expected for the Seoul Dynasty side. That's all I can say about that. But Los Angeles Gladiators in 12th. Dallas up to 13th now. Looking decent. Equal record with the Gladiators. Toronto in 14th. Chengdu Hunters now up to 15th. And, you know, I mean, if the meta doesn't bring them down, they could still keep climbing. London down to 16th now. Again, London have quite a few matches to play. They have 3 matches against Seoul Dynasty coming up after the Countdown Cup, but they do have rough fixtures against the New York Excelsior and Shanghai Dragons to play. But next week I believe they play the Hangzhou Spark, which needs to be a win if London want to climb. Houston Outlaws in 17th, Vancouver in 18th. I don't see Vancouver going anywhere. Washington Justice in 19th, but for catching Vancouver now. And Boston Uprising still firmly rooted to the bottom of the league in 20th. And I really don't see the Boston Uprising finishing anywhere else but at the bottom. And that is where we are going to leave it for this one. Tomorrow we will do Team of the Week, which is going to be a super duper interesting one. We're going to see some different faces. And yeah, it's been an interesting week. And we will see how the meta shifts next week. I think we will go back to Orisa Sigma. But yeah, there'll be a meta preview as well. Oh yes. An extra hour video this week. Anyway, for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.